These are the native irises. The Pacific has the different names you want to call them, that I have bred through the years, and you're all familiar with them. And as you know the story, it started very innocently in 1970, when I was young and more vigorous and all that other stuff. And I went to shows because at that time, the shows were put together a little bit differently. And everyone who received the blue ribbon in some of the few clubs that existed at that time gave you an iris for every blue ribbon you won. But that you didn't have the white, you didn't have the alphabetic order that we have now. It was specific by colors, and maybe it was all of 15 classes. Now it could be, who knows, 30 of them. And so it was a little different. And since I was young and I didn't have the money and I would do anything to increase my collection at that time, I entered shows and I got, well, my first show I went to one in 1956 because in those good old days, the 3A book had a listing of activities or places that there were shows. And they had one listed in Willow Glen in San Jose, and that's over the hill. And I had never gone to one, but I had read about it. And so and I told you this story. I didn't have a car at that time. I would have graduated in 1956 from high school. And my parents let me use their vehicle if I was very careful going over 17, because 17 was a little bit more interesting in those days. They didn't have the barrier. I remember going with a friend back to San Jose State, and he would take all 4 lanes in those days. There wasn't that much traffic. Of course, there could have been, and then there would have been a problem. And so at any rate, it is from there I went to Jack Craig, who was in Cupertino, who then was just a little bird with a little dot on a map with a little crossroads, and that was Cupertino. It was not, Steve Jobs and the whole world that's there now. And Homestead Road was where there was sort of where you got to his place. And I got there to collect the 3 irises I had won for having first place, which were important to me. And I go in there, and he not only gives me the 3 I had won, I said, would you like this one? Would you like that one? And so forth. Yes. And what he was a aide of Sidney B. Mitchell at the library at UC Berkeley. That's who he was. And Sidney B. Mitchell was an important person in the American Iris Society at that time. And in that, he had these bottles of seed. He had 8 bottles of seed. And I said, well, he tells me it's these things. I said, would you like some? Well, not really. But I was being nice. I said, okay. And so he gave me collections of 8 different envelopes full of that seed he had accumulated. And when I got it home, I said, what the hell am I going to do with this stuff? I don't want it. I've seen these things growing in the hills. They're ugly. And so I said, well, I got to plant them. And so I put some dirt in a coffee can, these coffee cans that you don't find anymore. And as I put it against the patio wall. And the damn thing comes spring germinate. So now what do I do with this thing? And so I said, well, I just leave them alone. I can't be bothered. Who wants that junk? And so I left it alone, and then come spring, the damn things, handfuls of them, bloom in the can. And I go, now these don't look like the things that are in the hills around here. Here was clear yellows and blue, not blue, but certainly purples. They were bigger flowers than all the rest. And that sort of intrigued me because I that's not what I was accustomed. I was accustomed to those of you who've gone in the native and looked at stuff. They're very narrow petals, sort of usually a buffy color, kind of ugly. They grow along Highway 17. But these didn't look like that. And so I was intrigued, so I had to plant them all out. And that's how it all started. And so, because now I had yellow, I had purple, I had a lot of different colors in these cans of seed he had given me. And so it is from there, and finally 1970. Oh, and I also at that point got kind of excited about it and then went on the hills looking for this stuff, growing in its native habitat. And one of the most interesting ones I found was in Pasatiempo along Graham Hill Road, where there was an entrance at that time to go into Pasatiempo. There was no building there. And there were these irises, these things blooming, but they bloomed in December, which didn't make sense. Why are they blooming in December? And they're not supposed to. And so I wrote to Lee Lenz, who had written a definitive paper on them, and I told him what I found. He said, well, why don't you send me some blooms so I could really examine them carefully what they are. So I collected some, put them in a plastic bag, and sent them off to, what was it, Santa Anita Botanic Garden, where he was in charge of. And he came back and said, well, these are nothing more than the normal complex of hybrids you find in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There are crosses, natural crosses through the generations of three species, microcyphon, Fernaldehyde, and Deglossiana, which is the one you see along the ocean side mostly. But you have found a particular collection that has not been contaminated. And it has this trait of blooming early. And I want some of it because it's unusual. And I thought, oh, I found something unusual. At any rate, so I sent him some, and I then began using them with the seed which Jack Craig had given me, which was very hybrid stuff, because who was it, in Oregon, Ritter? People would send stuff to him they thought had possibilities for breeding, and he would pass it on to people he thought would also advance that particular thing. That's what Sidney Mitchell did, which is a name you know, it's the name of an Iris Society and all of that. People would send him seed or plants that they found somewhere that was unusual. They would send them to him, and then he would pass them on to somebody else who he thought would make use of them if they had commercial possibility. And one of the people that he gave this stuff to, other stuff to as well, was Renault. You know, Verily and Renault, the begonias, if you were around long enough like me, existed along Capitola Road, which is now part of Capitola. And there he developed the three strains, which a lot of it was based on seed that Sidney B. Mitchell had sent to him from various parts of the world. And he was in Placerville in the beginning. And, but the stuff he was breeding with didn't grow that well in Placerville. And he ultimately moved down to Capitola, on Capitola Road, 38. Now it's further along than that, it's like 48th Avenue or something. And developed his Pacific Coast strain of, which you probably heard of, delphiniums, primrose, and begonias. And it's all seed that originally came via Sidney B. Mitchell. Now in Placerville, where he was breeding, he was doing irises, especially the onco, this is Renault. The oncocypress, you know, the ones you've seen with those exotic forms and the black dots for the spot and all the lines and all that. But they grew well there. Then he comes down here, and it's not to their liking. And so it wasn't work, so he began concentrating on the 3 ones I told you about. But coincidentally, his best one that he had from all of that line of breeding, the Arrow line of breeding, was named Capitola. And that's why you see Capitola, if you go back far enough, in the pedigree of so many of those Arrowbreds now they're called. They were called something else in those they were called Oncocyclids or Oncobreds. And so that's how that all came about. Now this is boring you on a subject other than what I came here for. This head has so much stuff in it, it's got I'm sharing it with you. So anyway, let's go back to what I came here for. What I did today, I was, unfortunately, I can't do as much as I used to do or as well as I could. But at 4 o'clock, I went on and began digging. Normally, I would have a lot more for you. Some of the things I have bred over the years, they're named and they're grown all over the world now. And this is a clump of a hybrid that goes back, in a lot of cases, if you go back far enough, we'll find those original things I collected way out in the hills, in the hinterland. We went to Big Basin, I remember. I was young. We would go in those days, we went for a Sunday ride. I don't know if you did in those days. We did, and we go to places like Big Basin. We might go all the way to Los Gatos. And because there was a Foster Freeze there that had the best hot dogs with chili on them, across from Los Gatos High School. And we'd show up at people's houses. You didn't tell people you were coming, you just showed up. And that's what you did in those days. Now, heaven forbid. And it was an and it just was normal, it's what you did. And so I can reconstruct a lot of the places we visited, this person's ranch and so on and so on. So at any rate, it was from those cans of seeds, from the seed that Jack Craig gave me and a few things I collected in the hills, that what we have today. And even I am sort of astonished where it started and where it is today. As we've mentioned, you can still go out in the hinterlands and you can still see those straggly, poorly substanced, virtually ugly colored things.
Poor babies.
But that's the reality compared to what we have now. And through those many, many, many generations now, we have all of these wonderful, what we like, what I like. The beautifully formed, overlapping petals, ruffles on them with colors you never imagined possible. And I'm kind of happy that I feel good that I'm one of the ones that brought them to this point. And it sort of, it takes time and it takes a lot of things to be able to develop and follow through to a certain point where you get to what you have. And there are a lot of people that helped along the way. Dick Richards and his wife at the time, Joyce, or Mount Baldy, I guess, and they had gone to the foothills of Yosemite, and they found Iris munsii growing in its natural habitat there. And what it is and why it is so important is because it was blue, really blue, not the purpley things that you see around here, or the ugly, buffy yellow things. And they brought me one time a little container of buds of munsii that they had collected at that place. And they brought those to me, and my things were basically done blooming by then, and it was in the beginning. And I go, what am I going to do with these? They're blooming now. I don't have anything. But so, at any rate, there were 3 or 4 things in bloom, like Pasta Temple, and we won't go into how I came up with that name, easily, because that was the place where I found that original in clay bloom. But at any rate, so I crossed them with whatever was in blooming. And it was that blue color, which didn't exist before. It wasn't in the hybrids. at that point. And so I just crossed them with whatever was blooming. There were 3 or 4 or 5 in bloom, that's it. And it is there where you see the blue color that I have now basically came from that little handful of buds that showed up at my doorstep. And so I have to thank a lot of people along the way who brought me this stuff that would have made possible what you see now. And so it's just to show you that, you know, it's not just one person doing it. It's really a lot of people who see a possibility in someone and then give it to them to follow it through. And what you see now is what you're going to get here free today. That's a quick synopsis of the beginning of a few of the little threads that go into producing these things in 2021. And even I was standing in amazement when I see them. I said, this is really what happened through all of this, and there it is. And so, you know, that's a little me reminiscing now that so many years, I'm going to be the 83rd year is this year. And that's all happened in my lifetime, and I've been able to participate in it, see it happen, and make it happen. And so, at any rate, that's a little bit aside from the old man telling you a story. Now, what you really want to know is what you do with these damn things. And what I did today, as I told you, I dug up after 4 o'clock as many as I could, and my body would hold out for. And they're my originations. Most of them are very recent. And just to show you what to do. If they were in a clump, these were once in a clump. But in order to save time, we did it beforehand and pulled it. And all you do is just pulling them apart. And you get each one as a plant. So this was one clump. Here's one clump with a lot of little ones together. And I'll take one out so there's more. And this is what you plant. And what you do is, at this time of the year, but it's been rather warm off and on around here, is I did start watering them because I have to ship to the northwest and different places. And the roots start growing. And you want them to kind of at least show an indication of growing. And it's been weird, or what happens is these are 2-year clumps because I can't replant every year like I used to. And I watered them, but the water, it's clay soil I have at my home garden where they're planted. And the water doesn't go into the ground very well because it gets very hard, especially in the second year. It gets like concrete almost. But you notice they grow just fine. This is from a 2-year clump, and it's just one plant of which there might have been, who knows, 5, 10 of them. And because the water isn't absorbing into the ground, and I don't have a drip system like I do at the ranch, it doesn't water them too well. But don't worry about it. You notice they're very healthy, they're very green, they've made all kinds of increase, and they should, every one of these should make a bloom stalk come spring. This one, and this one. And what you have to do when you take these home, be sure to put them in some water, because they're not like bearded iris that can stay out of the water and survive. These will not survive. A lot of beardless irises will not survive unless they're kept damp in some way. And so the easiest thing I find to prepare them for replanting is just simply take the clump that you have divided apart like I have done, and you just hold it together, and then you just flip it. That's it. And then you just plant it in the ground. I plant in rows because I'm doing volume. And in the ground means just basically under the pinkish part of the rhizome. It's like bearded iris, any other iris. You just want it basically under the ground. Okay, at this time of the year, then you've got to water them in. Now that's important really when you plant any kind of iris. Just don't plant it in and expect a sprinkler or something else to do it. The best thing to do is to hand water it. I make a well around I might do in these, I might plant that, a well around the whole numbers of the variety I'm planting. On the bearded I put a well only around the one I'm planting. And then I hand water it in. And what the advantage that has, it makes the soil fill in any holes around the plant that you have put into the ground. Now, as I mentioned in the newsletter, the weed of the year this year is fillery. I have never, ever seen it grow like it grows this year. And if you're not familiar with fillery it's what we would call scissors plant, and I wrote about it, but I'll repeat it. I like to repeat it. What we did as kids, we would get they make the seed pods that look like a sword. Okay, and then you take the sword, you make a little hole in one, and then you put the other seed pod through the hole, and you now have scissors. Remember? No, yes. Imagine kids nowadays doing that. No. That was simple pleasures and a simple thing to do in our age, my age. And they said, what the hell are you talking about? You know, we got to do this computer stuff and all that. Okay. So, at any rate, I indicate what this is how you dig up a clump and basically you just pull them off like this. Simple. Okay, now, and as I said, when you plant them, I just suggest this is a simple way. Just cut them there. Yeah, you could be, if you're a neat freak, you can take all the dead leaves off. But I can't be bothered doing that. Why be bothered doing that? It doesn't really bother me.
They look cuter.
So oh my, I lost part of the name here in one of these. That's the process, and it's a, you know, I try to give a little variation of the story because I've done this every year. Is there some burning question you have about these things? Yes, over here.
I have a question. At what period or time in the future will these go back to their original?
They
Will they
won't.
ever?
They won't.
They won't.
But by the same token, they won't revert like some things do. These won't. What you get if you think you have a reversion is you forgot to take the damn seed out because they will develop a seed pod. And what you have growing that you think is a sport or something, a variation of it, is nothing more than that seed that dropped in the ground and grew, and then 2 years later or 3 years later blooms in that location. That's what happened there. In a lot of things like the bearded iris, that doesn't happen as much as the fact that the vigorous one just sort of takes over the less vigorous one, and it is the one that changed color. It didn't change color. It's just the less vigorous one, or the more vigorous one has taken over the weaker one. Survival of the fittest. Yes.
In the past, you've always told us to put them in water and grow the white roots before we plant them. Are you saying we don't need to do that?
I'm saying that it is better, especially as you get later in the season, like we're getting to now. The question was, should you wait till, if you put these in water, and you've got to keep them in water. Remember I told you they don't want to be out of water, so when you get home, get a bucket of water and stick them in there. It's better if they have some, see this has no roots showing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, but it doesn't have any roots showing. That's because it's probably in the center of the clump. And I don't know this particular, well, it started. If you can't see it there, but you can see these yellow little dots. That's the root that has already gotten a little bit of moisture that it wants to begin growing. Because this is the time they do that. But I mean, more than this. These grow, plus it then has more little babies coming off of it. So I would, if you get them too long, you have, too long is maybe 4 inches, 5 inches. you're breaking that root that has already started growing. It's not happy. It won't die, but it sort of sets it back. Whereas actually, if you can get it, and this is a hard thing to have happen, where you see these little yellow dots, and if you look at this one up close, you can see all those little yellow dots have already begun, it's got enough water that it started pushing out. But that dirt is so hard, it dries so rapidly, it's about as far as it can go. But this stage is really an optimum stage, where the root is there, it has really started popping out, and it's dying to grow. And you put it in and treat it like we talked about, and it'll just do wonders come, well, actually, probably by the end of January, it'll begin really going gangbusters. So that's the process. You can see it's a dirty project, especially if you have me dealing with it. Yes.
So when it gets those pods, I had a couple of they get these pods. So what you're saying is, and correct me because I'm a newbie, is you have this pod that appears, you take it off because you don't want it to revert.
Right. No.
No.
What you have is, it doesn't revert, remember, you really have a different hybrid. It's most likely the wind, more than anything, has caused the blooms to shake and cross them. Most of them are self-crosses. In other words, it's the same flower crossing itself, and it sets a seed.
So to maintain what you have here,
Yeah.
it's better to get rid of that pod.
If you don't want it to mess up your thing, I do this, you just go through and break off of those.
Okay.
Throw them away.
Take the pod off.
Yeah, or else you'll get that problem happening, you have something show up that doesn't look like what you thought it looked like. And that's why.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
What a surprise winner.
Okay,
We wouldn't wanna, fertilize it at all, or not? Don't we
These are, these are, as long as you have a slightly acid soil, not a heavy acid, but a slightly acid, they're happy.
Okay.
This is their native habitat. We're fortunate in that respect. So we have all the optimum things that they grow well under. If you want certain species like the Glossiana, which is the one that you see, it has a very much broader foliage than this. And you see it right on the ocean's edge. And then it'll go up some of the creeks partway. Then it might meet something else, they begin, they get all excited and they cross with each other. And so then you begin to get into hybrids, so you're into 10. And those of you who were lucky enough to go to the one, what's her name, lives on Back Ranch Road. We went there one time.
Yeah.
Karen Hinton.
Yeah.
I forget her name now.
Karen?
Oh, we looked at all of those.
Yeah, but at any rate, what she did, she particularly wanted to bring me to a stand of the Glossiana that she had growing along Laguna Creek. Laguna Creek is one of the sources for water for the city of Santa Cruz, but it also then flows out to the ocean and it feeds a lot of the ranches around there. And I have to admit, I was very impressed. I had never seen the Glossiana growing. Again, it's that instance of Passatempo I told you. It was an enclave, which I had seen this, the Glossiana, the wide foliage one, was growing tall like this, the foliage, and had bloom up here. And it was an instance of a particular clone that hadn't gotten mixed up with other adjacent species nearby. And she was very proud of this particular clone that she had. And there was just me, and I felt honored. I was one of the few who could see this particular special clone. Jerry Knight was with me too, and we had went to see it. And that, wish that sometime we could go as a club there again. That's an amazing garden. It's in the back of where the red, white, and blue beach, I don't know what it's called now, but it was in my day the nude beach. Now they're all nude beaches. And that road that goes under the pipe, and that back branch road, it ends up at Bonnie June somewhere. And well, Santa Cruz has a lot of interesting places. And she's an interesting person because she sort of has the Winchester Mystery House. Well, hers is a Winchester Mystery House of garden.
Yeah.
Every time you go up there, it's something else. It's something always building, something always developing. And it's an amazing place. You have to be a very honored person to be able to go there.
Is that where we went as a club one time and she had all these sculptures and?
Well, we went because somebody was, Christine Arbuckle knew her in some way or other.
Yeah, from the Dahlia Club, we all went
Yeah,
at your
yeah,
house
we
and
all
did
went
ours,
because
yeah.
she knew her
Yeah.
and made the arrangement, and we piggybacked on it and could go. And because her husband, now divorced, was a professor at Stanford, and he wrote the definitive book on business law. I mean, an impressive thing. Before you went in the garden, you had to sign papers that said they have no responsibility should you fall down or a rattlesnake bite you or anything like that. So it was always an interesting place to go. And she had done such things. It's interesting. See, now you're taking your time. But she had disbanded a whole farmhouse in Pennsylvania and brought it over here and reconstructed it on her property. And she did such things as collected South Asian art. And so you go these paths that you might find a rattlesnake against, but remember Jim Manfred bited you because you said that's okay. It was that kind of thing. And she did a lot of, I mean, I haven't encountered, since she got divorced, I don't know what happened. But there were a lot of, it was an interesting place to go to, and it's always, I wish we could go there again, because as far as I know, it still goes on, yes.
I remember she had transplanted an olive tree orchard.
That's right.
And then some of her housekeepers were from the Himalayas, because her husband had climbed Mount Everest.
Oh my
Really? Yeah, that's what her husband had done.
Yeah.
He's a professor at Stanford. And he had a particular mountain climber that he used to go up the Himalayas. And the Himalaya, those, what are they called, the Sherpas? Yeah, they are concerned that their children, they will die because they fall, because they bleed. And he guaranteed him that his children would be taken care of if that ever happened to him. And it did. And sure enough, he took the children in, 3 of them, and raised them as their own, went to all the schools here and so forth. And very nice. Anyway, we're going on to different subjects. And it's getting late, and I think it's about time we drew a drawing here. Unless you have a burning question, I have a couple here.
So, I'm brand new to PCI and PCH, but I'm very curious about it, and I've noticed that there are seed exchanges, but of course hybrids are always best propagated by splitting them like these. So I was just wondering, especially with such complex hybrids, I mean, what happens when you plant the seeds? Aren't they different? Are they vastly different at times, or?
Well, to be realistic with you, they're gonna be different, but they're not gonna be fancy like these. Unless it happens to be seed from things like this, in this generation. Because I'm now probably, who knows, 12, 15 generations from the original species. So, yeah, that seed will be different, but it won't be that different. it won't, if you care to get stuff like this, it's not gonna come from that seed. It grows, it does everything all this stuff does. That's all how I started, you know, those 8 coffee cans. Yeah,
When do PCIs bloom? And I think I read in the AIS report for the winners of the national awards that your PCIs took almost all the awards this year.
Yeah.
Only 3 of the top awards in the country. Is that right?
yeah. Actually, I had a better record than that. I had 13 of them going in a row.
That's what I thought. There were 3 other winners, and they were at the bottom.
Oh.
So, this is the man.
Well, it started like I told you.
Yeah.
So at any rate,
When do they bloom?
April and May.
April, May?
huh?
When do they bloom?
When do they bloom?
Yeah.
Okay, the normal peak bloom time for me in town, and I'm a mile from the ocean, is the first week of April. Now they will, because of those hybrid things I told you, I can get scatterings of bloom in February, but the peak bloom, that's when you get the most of it, is that first week. But again, it's dependent on the climate and all those factors that we, and now, and you know, there's definitely a climate change. I have seen it in the 68 years I've been growing plants. It isn't the same. It's weird. It just sort of goes off when it feels like it now. Before it was very distinct. You could pick a time and it happened. Now it just sort of goes here, 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 and there's a bulk time, but it doesn't do like it used to do. So that, I've been able to see that happen in my lifetime. And it's interesting. But we better get this done because we're getting late.
Just give one thing, in the mountains, my peak bloom was April 25th this year.
Awesome, thank you.
Down where we are across the hill, it's earlier than that, right, Jane?
Yeah, it starts in March.
Yeah, it starts in March.
In March, yeah, I can get a spattering, but the bulk of it is that 1 week.
And there's just one
Man
other
with the
thing,
hat.
if I can add quickly.
Please.
Every year around March, like we were talking about, over at Apple Computers' new campus, all around the edge, they have gardens. They have so many iris, it's Pacific Coast iris, it's breathtaking. They're not all fancy, but they sure are pretty.
There's a lot of
Auditoriums and stuff, but they were mostly fancy.
I also, if you've been to the Palace of Fine Arts, around the lake, they have all the native irises planted.
Nice.
And I've seen some of my children there. I don't know where they got them, because it's something I named.
They ran away.
I know my children when I see them. All right, so you're gonna do this, and we'll let the president take it.